Hi, everybody. Before we get to another great interview, the Two Opinionated podcast could really use your help. And it's easy, it's free. IMDb, which is the entertainment database, imdb.com, named us a top 100 podcast. We came in at number 82. That's a big deal because there's 15 million podcasts and growing. So to be named to anybody's top 100 list, pretty big deal for us. And the way you can help is to go to imdb.com, look up the Two Opinionated podcast, and that's it. Just bringing our page up. That traffic really helps us out. Our YouTube channel is MeisterCon Pod. All we ask is that you subscribe. It's also free, but that really helps us to attract these amazing guests that we keep bringing on the program. And that's it. Two easy ways for you to support us, and we would really appreciate the help. Now let's get to that interview. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Two Opinionated. I'm so excited today. I've got author Eduardo Goncalves. So welcome, Eduardo.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Michael.
I'm so excited to talk with you. And honestly, I'm underselling you just saying author. You've done so many other things. And we're talking today, you're getting ready to release 3 books at once.
Yes, well, as you might remember 10 years ago, and it's almost exactly 10 years ago, one of the biggest stories in the world was the killing of Cecil, this lion that was shot in Zimbabwe by an American dentist, Walter Palmer. And so for the last few years, I've been researching the trophy hunting industry and researching trophy hunters. And actually, what I've been trying to do most recently is answer the one question that I keep getting asked and which I've never really satisfactorily been able to answer, which is why do these people do it? What drives somebody to kill a beautiful, majestic animal just for the hell of it, for
Or, yeah.
fun, and what goes on in their mind? So this is what this trilogy of books is about. So what I've done together with a colleague of mine, we joined Safari Club International, the big trophy hunting group.
Yeah.
We contacted hunters, we contacted the CEOs of companies that organize hunting expeditions in Africa, in Canada, in Asia, in Europe, everywhere. And we spoke to their customers, their satisfied customers.
Yeah.
And we also visited their trophy rooms. We met with their taxidermists who turned their heads
Well,
and
did they
bodies into.
know what kind of books you were going to be writing?
No.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I use an alias because it's not a common name, and I'm obviously out there a fair bit in the media talking about these
Yeah.
issues. And I knew I wasn't going to get past first base if I just said,
Well,
"Hi,
that's
it's
right.
me."
That's
Yeah,
right.
and so yeah, that's basically what I've done. So I've got these three books coming out, which are as much as possible actually written in their own words, if you like. So it's the conversations we had, it's the emails they sent me, and in some cases also the articles that they've written in sort of obscure industry journals, which don't usually see the light of day. And so the first book, which is about the world's top trophy hunters today, it's called 20 Elephants in 75 Minutes. So that's one of the boasts of one of the hunters that's in there.
I
Then the
mean, can
second
you
book,
imagine? I mean, we're talking about elephants,
yeah.
and to kill 20 of them in any amount of time, but just that quickly. I mean, that just to me, that just it kind of makes me sick to my stomach. That's terrible.
Well, one of the things that shocked me was that just how many animals are still being killed every year by trophy hunters. So we remember how big a news story Cecil was, okay?
Yeah.
And you would have thought that that might have shamed people into not doing it. Wrong. So since Cecil was killed in 2015, trophy hunters have shot another 10,000 lions. Right. And now, just to put that number 10,000 into some context, scientists reckon that there's probably fewer than 20,000 lions left in the wild right now.
Wow.
And the decline has been absolutely catastrophic. So in the 1970s, that's not that long ago, but there were around 200,000 lions back then. So that's what, 5 decades ago.
Yeah,
And
that's
since
not very. I mean, it's within our lifetime.
within our lifetime. And yet now, there's been what, a 90% decline in that period. And it's not just lions. So every year, trophy hunters are shooting tens of thousands of endangered species. So it's elephants, it's rhinos, it's cheetahs. There's only 6,500 cheetahs left in the world. It's Africa's most endangered big cat. You can go and shoot cheetahs. You can shoot giraffes. You can shoot pretty much anything and everything. And it's incredibly easy to go on a trophy hunt, to buy one of these hunting
So
holidays, if you want to call it that.
when you go, or when a hunter goes on these trophy hunts, is there any skill actually involved? I mean, it seems like it's anybody could go out there and kill something if you've got this equipment that just makes it so, and the animals, I don't think at times they're not even trying to get away.
No, well, there's a lot there. No, first of all, absolutely, there's no requirement to show any aptitude or skill or certification or anything. You don't even have to take your own weapon. They've got them there for you. You can rent them and shoot away. And and actually, one of the problems is the fact that these people aren't marksmen. They're not snipers.
Right.
They're not trained in any way, and they are invariably pretty bad shots. And not only that, they're shooting animals from usually a couple of hundred yards away. They're
Right.
doing that to, for their own safety. You don't want to be right up in front of
That's
a
right.
charging elephant or buffalo, whatever. And shooting an animal from 200 yards and trying to shoot it in a particular place to try and kill it, because some of these animals have got big, thick skins, and some
Right.
places, you're not going to kill it outright. And so what invariably happens is that animals are really badly wounded, and many of them, it then takes a long time for them to die, or in some cases they're lost because they crawl off. I mean, if we remember Cecil, so Walter Palmer, he shot Cecil with a bow,
Yeah.
and he didn't kill it. And he was using a bow because he wanted to get a special prize from Safari Club International given to hunters who shoot big game animals with just a bow and arrow. And so if he'd put it out of its misery with a rifle shot, it would have invalidated his claim. So
Right.
what he did is he went back to camp, he had a nice dinner, he had a nice night's rest, and then he expected to find Cecil dead in the morning. He thought he would die overnight. Well, they came back, he went back with his hunting guide, and they couldn't actually see Cecil because he'd moved. He'd crawled under some bushes a couple of hundred yards away, but they could hear him. They could hear him because there was this horrible rasping noise of him struggling for breath as his lungs were filling with blood. Now, what scientists in the US, in fact, have shown is that over half of all animals shot by trophy hunters are not killed quickly and cleanly. They die slow and painful deaths. And there's really no regulation of this industry whatsoever. As you mentioned, you can get a whole load of animals that are just in fenced in areas. They're bred specifically for the purpose, and lions being the big one. And there was a British hunter that I spoke to a while ago, and he was boasting about how he managed to get up to shoot an animal, shoot a lion from just 8 yards away. Well, of course he did, because this animal was tame. He'd been hand reared, he'd been bottle fed, then hand reared, and then put in this field with fences. And the lion probably thought that he was going to come and feed it. He'd probably bringing it
Right.
dinner. So he didn't see it as a threat. He didn't have the fight or flight response, which a normal wild animal would have. And so, yeah, two-thirds of the lions that have been shot over the last few years actually are these so-called canned lions. They're called canned lions because the result is in the can. You've got an absolute certain result. You're going to kill this animal
Right.
because A, it's pretty tame, B, it can't escape because you've got these fenced-in areas.
Yeah. It just to me, there's no sport to that.
No, no. And the other thing that happens is that the industry, well, it has awards and record books, which are designed to do two things. One is to encourage people to shoot as many animals as possible. So the
Right.
more you shoot, the more prizes you get, the bigger and better prizes you get. They also have these alternative weapons prizes. So you can get special prizes, for example, for shooting big game animals with a revolver. We're just going out shooting an elephant or a giraffe or whatever it is with just a handgun. Okay. There are special categories in the records book, again, for shooting big game animals with just an air gun. So, for example, shooting a hippopotamus with an air gun. Now, these animals are already hard enough to kill outright with your first shot, particularly if you're shooting from a long way away. And what tends to, I mean, there's actually one of the hunters that's in my books, and he's kind of critical actually of some of the other hunters around. And he says, you know, because of these prizes and so on, you get these ridiculous scenes, for example, of people trying to shoot a rhino with a revolver. And of course, it doesn't kill the animal straight away. And the animal is ending up looking like a stuck pig with sort of blood spurting out all over the place, and they can't kill it. It's absolutely insane. But the other thing is, again, there's just no regulation. So you can go on the internet today. I mean, you can go on the internet after the show if you want, Michael, and just type in the words bookyourhunt.com. So this is a website that's just like Amazon or eBay, and you can literally buy any animal to shoot online. It's got thousands of animals available at any one time. So you want to shoot a cheetah? Type in cheetah in the search engine. If you want to shoot an elephant, put in elephant. Or you can shoot some really exotic things. If you want to shoot, let's say, Australian wallabies, you can do that. If you want to shoot camels, you can do that. You can shoot seals. You can shoot skunks, squirrels. I mean, you name it. It is all there. And there's no controls. There's no regulation. Any Tom, Dick, and Harry, as they say in England, can go on one of these websites and just buy any animal they want to kill just for the hell of it.
When you when you heard about Cecil, what were at that point? What were you doing? What was your kind of profession at that point? Were you already kind of looking at the trophy hunting, or did that spark that?
It sparked it because actually at the time I was working on environmental conservation issues, so
Yeah,
specifically climate and energy at the time. But I remember thinking, what the hell? Which I think is the reaction pretty much everyone on Earth had.
yeah,
And it was a kind of, this is still going on. I thought this kind of thing had died out decades ago. It was,
right.
you know, vanished with you know, the days of the British Empire or whatever. That in a modern civilized society, this kind of thing just wasn't allowed to go on. And in fact, later that year, I was headhunted to become the CEO of Britain's largest sort of animal welfare and cruel sports charity. And so this was one of the issues I became involved in. And then shortly after that, I heard about how they were going to bring back elephant hunting in Botswana. Now, elephant hunting had been banned in Botswana for a very good reason. It holds one third of all of Africa's elephants.
Right.
So this is a country, it's not that big, it's probably about the size of the state of Texas, and it holds 1 in 3 African elephants that are alive today. So it's a really important
Yeah. Yeah.
population.
You want to protect that.
You want to protect it. And the previous president had actually done that. He banned, in fact, all trophy hunting there, and he turned the sort of nature tourism and photographic safari industry into a huge success. In fact, it became the second largest industry in the country. And bear in mind, Botswana is landlocked, so it doesn't have any you know, nice coastline and beaches to attract tourists. Its main industry is diamonds, but it quickly became a tourist magnet as well because of the nature and photographic safari industry which he built up there, which of course protected the elephants and their habitats. But so anyway, I kind of thought, all right, I've really got to do something dedicated on this because I discovered that there weren't any organizations that were working specifically on this one issue. And I thought it was such an important issue in its own right, it merited a campaign and an organization in its own right. So hence, I set up the campaign to ban trophy hunting, and I started writing books. And my first book was called Trophy Hunters Exposed, and it named some of the world's top hunters, but it also gave an introduction, you know, to the hunting industry. And this, I guess, trilogy is the sort of culmination of this series. And I mean, I came across things which, I mean, blew my mind, despite the fact I've been working on this issue for some years
Yeah.
now. So there was, for example, there was a trophy hunter who actually is the guy who said he celebrated the fact he'd shot 20 elephants in 75 minutes. And he's actually shot more than 4,000 animals, including
Great.
1,300 elephants. He shot 340 lions. He's even shot a couple of gorillas. So he shot over 4,000 animals. But he says, I only hunt in moderation. I only hunt in moderation. I mean, and to be fair, there were guys that even worse than him. So there's one guy who's shot 5,000 elephants. and lots more other animals, but he shot 5,000 elephants. And there's yet another guy who said, "Do you know what? I've actually lost count of the number of animals I've shot, but I know it's in the thousands." Um,
Have you ever hunted in your life?
no, no, I
Yeah,
haven't.
yeah, I never have either. I'm living in a state that is, full of hunting. We have a lot of hunting, mostly deer, here, but
Mhm.
I'm surrounded by it, but I've um, never had an interest in it.
Yeah, I mean,
I think I
I know
think
how
if
to
I
handle a
actually hurt
rifle.
something, I would feel terrible.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think I would too. I mean, because it just seems so cowardly, frankly. You're taking the life of a dumb animal. They're not dumb. They're emotionally intelligent and sentient, but you're taking the life of a creature that is defenseless with a weapon, and you're doing it just for fun. And this is the really important distinction about trophy hunting. Because I don't, for example, condemn, let's say, the Inuits who hunt seals or whatever for food. I mean, you're not going to be able to grow green veggies in the
Right.
ice,
That's right.
okay?
Well, there's a difference in hunting for survival. That's different.
Exactly. So hunting for subsistence, hunting for food, that is completely different. That's not what I'm talking about here. This is not what trophy hunting is. It is purely for entertainment, for vanity, for some deluded self, a sense of sort of self-aggrandizement. It's about showing off to your peers, not just your prowess, if you want to call it that, but also your power and money. Because to be a trophy hunter, you've got to be really rich. Because if you're going to shoot an elephant, for example, go for a wild elephant hunt, that's going to cost you tens of thousands of dollars, maybe 100,000 or more. Then the transformation of that into a mount and the shipping costs. And that's just one animal. And these people have got collections of thousands, thousands. But let me tell you actually what was the most disturbing thing of all in my study. And I guess it was the thing that answered the question that I was asking myself and that people keep asking me is why? Why do these people do it? What drives them? And I think I've kind of arrived at the answer. And it is they feel an extraordinary thrill when they do it. They get a really powerful adrenaline rush
Yeah.
and they actually become addicted to it like a drug. In fact, the last of the trilogy is called Mainlining on Heroin because that was how a trophy hunter in England described shooting lions and elephants and rhinos. He said it's like mainlining on heroin. But there's lots. I mean, let me just give you a couple of quotes. So there's a guy, for example, that we spoke to. He says, "When I see these animals, the adrenaline starts coursing through my blood." Another one calls the killing of an animal. He says, "This was the most emotional moment of my life." The guy who shot 5,000 elephants, he talks, I mean, there's a whole chapter about him talking about the exhilaration and the goosebumps and the excitement that he feels. Another one who's a bear hunter, he talks about the fire of desire that he has for this trophy. Another one talks about how trophy hunting, it's an adrenaline-induced experience, and so on and so forth. And
Yeah.
this is the common thread. They all feel this, almost like a chemical rush and it is such a strong and overpowering emotion. And and sometimes they cry. There's actually a guy, actually the guy who shot over 4,000 animals. I just was reading his testimony again, and he says after his first elephant hunt when he was 22 years old, he says, "I cried tears of joy." And I mean, so that's why they do it. They feel this. They're almost overpowered by these
Is there
emotions.
no other outlet to get
Of
that
course, there
kind
are.
of, I mean, maybe find something that doesn't cause, pain to another creature.
Right? Well, there was
Go
actually
climb a mountain or something.
well, quite well. There was a former American trophy hunter, a guy called Ken Damrow, who I spoke a few years ago, a couple of years ago. So he stopped, and it was something they used to go out every season, and it was he would go out with his brothers and his father and his uncle and his granddaddy and all of it,
Yeah.
and it was kind of like this big male posse thing. And he would get really excited, and then he just decided, this is just plain wrong, and he stopped. But he said that it actually took him a couple of years to wean himself off the addiction. So he would kind of, as part of his coming down routine, if you like, he would put on his camouflage gear. He'd put on his hunting gear at the beginning of the season, and he'd walk around in the woods. He wouldn't take a weapon with him, but he'd walk around, and he had to do that for a couple of years until he felt that he was over
I mean,
it.
that sounds as difficult to get off of as smoking is
Yeah,
for a lot of people. I mean, it's
I,
an
I
addiction.
well, I think that's what some people feel it is. The other very interesting thing, and this kind of relates to what Ken Damrow was saying to me, is that a lot of them start pretty much 85%, maybe more, of all the top trophy hunters out there. They all started hunting very, very, very young.
Yeah.
So they would start before they were 10. They'd often be given their first rifle before they were 10. And they would go initially with their elder brothers or their father and their uncle, their grandfather, and so on. And so it was kind of like a rite of passage. It was a kind of like being accepted into a male community.
Right.
It was a bonding experience, and that was when they would first get the taste for it. And of course, as we know, children that young are incredibly impressionable.
Yeah.
And you can do and say all sorts of things to a child at that age, which stay with them for life. And so making trophy hunting acceptable, not just acceptable, but actually a display of your manhood, of your manliness,
Right.
of your acceptance into, being a successful man as well. To have that imprinted on you at such an early age almost makes it inevitable that you're then going to spend a lifetime of hunting animals. And some literally do this. I mean, there was one guy, he's a Canadian. And he'd done a bit of trophy hunting,
Yeah.
and then he actually suffered a bit of a personal misfortune. So I think he lost his mother and his father. I mean, he's already a grown man at this stage, but he lost his mother and father. He lost a sister, and he also lost a daughter, all in the space of about 2 years. I mean, that's
Yeah.
pretty hard, okay?
That's a lot. Yeah.
But his reaction was to then go on an 18-year hunting spree, killing spree. Okay. So at the beginning of the year, in January, he'd go to the Safari Club International Convention, which is now in Nashville. It used to be in Reno. And he would buy up a whole load of hunts from the different stall holders and companies there.
Yeah.
And he'd spend the rest of the year hunting right through to the end of the year. And then following January, back at the convention, buys up a whole load more hunts, and off he goes again. And he did this for 18 years solidly. And his mission was to get at least one of every animal that you could legally hunt in the world. And he built up this collection of, I mean, hundreds, if not thousands, of heads and bodies of animals. And so the scale of the hunting that trophy hunters go on, I think I hadn't quite clocked that, they were killing so many animals. I think I mentioned before that one of the reasons they do that is because of these awards. So let me give you a couple of examples, actually. So Safari Club International, it has about 200 different awards.
Yeah.
I'll give you two examples. So there's one that's called the Hunting Achievement Award. And like a lot of the prizes that it has, it's on several different tiers. You know how we used to play Space Invaders when we were kids? And,
Yeah.
so to get onto level 2, you have to shoot however many aliens. And then to get onto level 3, you've got to shoot a whole load more aliens.
Right.
And level 4, and so on and so forth. It works exactly like that. So to get on the first rung of the Hunting Achievement Award, the copper level, they call it, you have to shoot at least 17 different animals. So animals from 17 different species. So then you get onto the bronze and you've got to kill, I think it's 30. And then it's silver. You have to shoot animals from 50 different species. Gold, it's 100 different types of animal. And then diamond, that's the top prize, 125 animals from different species. Each of at least one from 125 different species. And you think, whoa, I mean, that's kind of some big ask. Well, over 300 members of Safari Club International have won that particular prize, of the gold or diamond level. So just
Wow.
300 people have between them shot over 30,000 animals. And that's just in the last few years. Anyway, they've got all of these prizes, and then you've got different groups of prizes, and then you've got the cumulative prizes, and then you've got the super cumulative prize. And basically, to win the super cumulative prize, you've got to have won all of the other prizes, all of which are for shooting lots of animals. So it's top prize. And this is where we start getting into realms of complete self-delusion and lack of self-awareness. So the top prize that you can win at Safari Club International, to get it, you've got to have shot approximately 530, 540 different animals. Okay, 540 animals. And they call it the World Conservation Hunting Award. The World Conservation Hunting Award, because they convince themselves that what they're doing is good for good for the animals. This is how they justify it. I mean, this is straight out of George Orwell, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
it's 1984. It's the Ministry of Truth, which is the Ministry of Propaganda. It's the exact opposite of what the reality is. These people have to, and again, I mean, a
I
lot of
mean, if you
people have
only
done.
had like, a couple dozen people doing it, maybe you could make that type of argument, but and it's like each person is killing so many animals though. I
Yeah,
mean, it's
yeah.
obviously it's having a negative effect. You're going to end up we're going to lose species.
Well, trophy hunting has already led to the extinction of species in the wild. Going back to, the colonial era, there was, for example, an animal called the quagga. It's like the zebra, and it
Yeah.
was shot to extinction in fact, by the British royal family. The last one was shot by the Prince of Wales at the time. They went on this huge hunting expedition. British hunters also shot out the bluebok, which was a type of antelope in South Africa. But in more recent times, so in the 60s, 70s, 1980s, you had the scimitar oryx. So that's an antelope that lived in Central Africa. They've actually they've been breeding some in captivity, and they've just started to bring some back into the wild. So I think there's now just in the last couple of years, so there's now about 140 of these animals in the wild again. Another example was the Arabian oryx. The Arabian oryx, the last one was shot in the wild by a hunter in Oman in 1982. I was actually involved in the captive breeding program to bring it back from
Oh,
extinction.
really?
Yeah, I was working for the government of Abu Dhabi at the time, which was leading the program because it lives in its original sort of heartlands with the deserts of Abu Dhabi. But it used to range all the way west to sort of Morocco and all the way north to Jordan. Anyway, so we had this breeding program. Now, really bizarrely, I found out recently that the Abu Dhabi government, which has now reintroduced some into the wild, there's about 850 back in the wild, and it's just allowed hunters to come in and shoot them again for sport. There's a company that's established an office in the middle of the desert, and it's run by a Swiss guy, and American hunters have come there, and the bow hunters have come there, and they're shooting Arabian oryxes again.
I mean, what are countries doing to prevent that? Is there no laws to just stop some of that, especially with endangered animals?
You'd think that there were, and on paper, it seems that there are, or at least one in particular. So CITES, which is the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species,
Yeah.
it was set up to stop, activities like hunting and wildlife trade from driving species to extinction. And effectively, it bans or severely restricts any kind of hunting. And in fact, it groups animals into three sort of appendices. So Appendix 1, that's the most endangered animals, includes things like cheetahs, it includes things like leopards, it includes things like the scimitar horned oryx and the Arabian oryx and other animals that are right on the brink of extinction. And it says really explicitly that there must be no trade, there can't be any hunting. It can only be authorized in exceptional circumstances. Those are the exact words. Must only be authorized in exceptional circumstances. And you think, okay, that's a pretty tough bar.
Yeah.
That's not the case because CITES then said, well, do you know what? We don't consider trophy hunting to be trade because it's not a commercial activity, and therefore it's exempt. So and this is the bit that doesn't make sense. Of course, it's a commercial activity. I mean, they're defining it as non-commercial because a trophy hunter isn't doing that in order to sell the lion's head to
Right.
somebody else. Okay, but that trophy hunter has just gone and paid tens of thousands of dollars. There's a company that's making millions in profits. There's
Yeah.
a whole industry that is very wealthy. It's
Yeah.
clearly a commercial industry. And the big problem with that loophole is that it has allowed illegal wildlife traffickers to drive for coach and horses through the treaty. So there was a really good example, and I wrote about this in a previous book. There was this Thai, uh, so a guy from Thailand. He was a leader of this big criminal syndicate,
Yeah.
and what he was doing, he was getting rhino horns into China to turn into aphrodisiacs and traditional Chinese medicines and all the rest of it. And of course, this was decimating rhino populations. And in order to get around the CITES bans, he said, I know, I'm going to set up as a trophy hunting company, effectively. So he paid peasants and prostitutes from Vietnam to
Yeah.
get on a plane to South Africa, pretending to be a trophy hunter. These guys would travel with just like jeans, a t-shirt, and sneakers, right? They'd never been out of their village, let alone out of the country or gone to Africa. They would turn up. They'd never even held a rifle before. So the professional hunter, the hunting guide, would have to shoot the rhino for them. Then they would have to sort of put an X on the bit of paper saying because they were illiterate as well. So they had to sort of put a cross as their signature saying, yes, I'm taking this as a hunting trophy. And then they take it back and give it to the chap in Thailand. And, rhino horns worth hundreds of millions of dollars made their way legally into the black market using this black hole, this loophole. In fact, there was a case that I was just telling a journalist about earlier today. This involves Mexico.
Yeah.
So Mexico, um, there's two entries on the CITES database, which anyone can access, by the way. You have to sort of know your way around it a bit, but all the information about hunting trophy trade that's monitored is on there, and it has these two rogue entries for last year, and one is for I think it's something like 700 crocodile skins, and the other is 5,000 skins of a lizard called the red tegu. And these are supposedly hunting trophies. And what we're expected to believe is, firstly, there is somebody in Mexico who has gone and shot 700 crocodiles in one hunting trip, all right? And that there's another Mexican trophy hunter who has shot this very, 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 very precise number of red tego lizards, again, to put up as hunting. Where are you going to put 5,000
Yeah.
lizards up in your living room? I mean, above the fireplace, and you're not going to do that. But this is rife. So, again, there's loads of other examples. It's bear gallbladders. Again, that's something that's really valuable in the Chinese black market, the traditional Chinese market. They get the bile, which they, from the bear gallbladders, and so you see listings, again, usually very large and very precise numbers of hunting trophies that are bear gallbladders. I mean, where are you going to put a bear gallbladder above the fireplace?
Oh,
Obviously, it's
yeah.
not.
Yeah. Obviously, you're
Right.
not.
And we know that the Russian mafia is involved in this. And there's bear genitalia. There's other genitalia, which of course are things which they put in jars and in wine in China because it's supposed to be aphrodisiac or a status drink. Because there's like tiger penis wine is another one. The problem is, yes, we do have a law. In answer to your original
Yeah.
question, there is something called CITES, but it's got this ridiculous, absolutely absurd loophole, which not only does it not make sense in its own right, because clearly trophy hunting is a commercial activity and should be regulated by it, but it also allows the very thing that it was set up to try to stop from happening. In other words, illegal wildlife trade and indeed poaching. It
Right.
encourages poaching. So where you see, these ridiculous hunting trophies coming out of, you're going to see poaching happen there as well. It is, at the end of the day, two sides of the same coin.
Yeah. That's just awful. That's the whole situation's just terrible. So what's some solutions for some of this? How do individuals, governments, how do we slow that down or stop it?
I think there's three levels of action. I mean, firstly, we've got to do something at the international legal levels because clearly CITES isn't working. So you either amend CITES or you replace it with a treaty. I mean, my view is that the whole organization of CITES has become so rotten that it's probably unreformable. But also that the issue of trophy hunting is of such significance that it merits a treaty in its own right. I mean, my view is that there should be a treaty process commencing in the United Nations, and that it should be very much the same kind of treaties that you have, for example, for outlawing landmines or chemical weapons. And that's something that I think we're going to be calling for in the next few weeks and months. The other thing is, of course, countries do have the ability to do something at the national level. So you can allow what people can or can't hunt on your own territory, and you can also decide what your trophy hunters can bring in from other countries. So, and there's some no-brainers. Let's take Canada actually as an example. And I take this partly because we have this sort of vision of Canada as quite a progressive and
That's right.
civilized country, and it is in many ways. But in other ways, there are some, well, things that are going to surprise you. So Canada is the only country in the world where you can currently go polar bear trophy hunting.
Oh, yeah, that does
America,
surprise me.
yeah. So America used to have polar bear trophy hunting. No more. Banned it. Russia used to have polar bear trophy hunting. No more. It's banned it. Norway, that's got Svalbard Island, it's polar bears there. It also banned it. So the only country that still allows polar bear trophy hunting is our neighbours to the north, Canada. Now, I believe, and I'm going to be calling on the government of Canada to say, look, we all know that polar bears are in trouble, right? You know, it's changing in climate and the effect that's having on habitat and food resources. Plus, there's a big commercial skin industry still in polar bear fur. You know, so it's seen as a luxury item in the Chinese market. So it's under all sorts of threats. The one thing we can do right now is say, stop. We're not going to allow any more polar bear trophy hunting. That's it. You simply don't
Yeah.
allow people to come in from outside. The other thing, of course, is you as a country can say, I'm not going to allow my trophy hunters from my country to go and bring in their polar bear trophies. And interestingly, the US has done that. In fact, the US has got some progressive regulations in that respect. So if you're an American trophy hunter, you're not allowed to bring in a polar bear. You're not allowed to bring in a cheetah. You're not allowed to bring in a canned lion, so one of these captive bred lions. You're not allowed to do that if you're an American hunter. You can if you're a British hunter. If you're a British hunter, most of the lions that you're going to shoot are canned. And British hunters, and in fact, I know because because of the most endangered animals, the government actually has to issue an import permit to the hunter. So that's how we know. And I know, in fact, I did a piece on TV about this here just a few weeks ago. We proved that the government in Britain had been issuing import permits, special import permits for British hunters who wanted to bring back cheetah bodies. So there are a number of countries that have started banning imports of hunting trophies. Some are sort of narrower, some are wider. So, for example, countries like Australia and France, you can't get lion trophies. Countries like Belgium and the Netherlands and Poland, they brought in wide-ranging bans. Finland's going to be doing something similar. France is talking about expanding the scope of its ban. Italy's talking about bans. Germany's talking about bans. And in fact, it's been government policy in Britain since 2019. We just haven't got to it. And one of the reasons for that is that the trophy hunting industry, it's a big and powerful
Well, I
industry.
was going to say it's probably similar to the gun industry here in the States, where
Yeah.
they're putting so much money into protecting their interests. It's difficult to get them out.
Well, they're often one and the same people. So the people who are at the head of the NRA, often at the head of the Safari Club International,
Yeah.
they work together on campaigns. They use the same Washington, D.C. lobbyists. So companies like Crossroads Strategies, they work for the NRA, they do work for for SCI, Safari Club International, and they do joint lobbying of Congress members and so on and so forth. And they raise money in a number of ways. So one of them is just by getting hunters to go and apply for all of these awards. Because, okay, you spend the money to shoot the elephant and to turn it into a trophy, but then to actually get the kudos out of that, you've got to get two things. Firstly, it's got to be a big enough elephant to go into the record book. You want to be in that record book, okay? It's like a Hall of Fame thing. And so you've got to pay an official measurer to come and weigh the tusks of that elephant. Or if it's a lion, what they do is they boil the skull and then they measure it from top to bottom, and then from side to side. Do it in inches, and it's got to be at least a total of 23 inches for it to be eligible for the record book. So that's the first thing. And then, of course, and then you want to list your award in the record book. If it passes, you've got to
Right.
pay for that as well. And then, of course, you want to apply for one of these awards, whether it's the African Big Five Award, or whether it's the Animals of Africa Award, or the Hunting Achievement Award, or whatever. For each of those awards, you've got to pay to apply. And then you've got to pay again to be listed in the awards document, the awards book. And
It's
then
just
if
a
you
big
want to,
racket.
isn't it? And
Yeah.
then to receive the plaque or statuette, you've got to pay another $3,000 or $4,000. And then if you've won all these awards and you want it to be presented to you at the big gala dinner that Safari Club International has every year, and it's like the Oscars, and you've got, like Donald Trump Jr. and Tucker Carlson and so on as the speakers, and they had the Rump Beach Boys a couple of years ago, so not Brian Wilson or Al Jardine, but it was Mike Love and his outfit. So they would play. I say this because Brian Wilson actually supports our work. Unfortunately, of course, he's just passed
Right.
away,
Yeah, we
but
just
he was a
lost him.
supporter of our work, and he supported a campaign that we were running to urge people to boycott the Beach Boys, or rather, Mike Love's Beach Boys. Anyway, both him and Al Jardine were supporting us. But anyway, so these are big, big affairs, and you get the photographers there, and it's all filmed, and it's all the lights and glitzy, and dinner and all the rest of it. So yeah, these guys are making a lot of money. And then the other thing that they do at the gala is they have these auctions. So Safari Club International asks hunting companies as a sign of goodwill to donate hunts to it that it can auction off in order to raise money for its lobbying work.
Yeah.
And so they auction off polar bear hunts, they auction off leopard hunts, and so on and so forth. And so Safari Club International spends just on lobbying. I worked this out. I mean, but it's like at least $14 million a year.
Yeah. That seems
And
like a lot.
yeah, and they have these different pots of money. So one's called the Hunter Legacy 100 Fund. So what they got 100 members of Safari Club International to each put $100,000 into a pot. So 100 times $100,000. So that's just one of their pots. Then they have another thing which is called the Society of the Lion and the Shield. And so you've got some people who've donated $2 million to that, some who've donated 1 million, some who've donated 500,000, some who've donated 250,000. I mean, you've got dozens of people, probably more than dozens actually, but anyway, a lot of people who've donated three-figure sums just to that pot as well. So it's got all of these different fundraising schemes. I mean, it's a hell of a business model. You've got to say
Sure.
that.
Yeah. Yeah. Somebody's getting rich off of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so Eduardo, let's go through the three books and
Yeah.
tell us the name of each one and what each one's about.
Sure. So, book number one is called 20 Elephants in 75 Minutes.
Yeah.
And this book names the 25 top trophy hunters in the world today. And it says how many animals they've killed, what their trophy rooms look like, and it tells in their own words some of their most memorable hunting adventures. So, and a lot of that book is hunters' own words saying, and they talk about this species, lions and elephants and polar bears and all sorts of other things and the different weapons they've used. So it's kind of like a biography of the
Right.
top trophy hunters in the world today. Then, so book two is called Shoot One Lion, Get One Free. So this is about hunting companies. This is about the business, the firms that sell and organize and host these hunting holidays. And again, it looks at the companies that are responsible for shooting the greatest number of the most endangered animals.
Yeah.
So there's some that specialize, for example, in rhino hunts. There are some that specialize in canned lions. There's some that specialize in cheetahs, some that specialize in polar bears. And then actually there's companies around the world. It's not just Africa or North America. You've got some that specialize in Russian bears and European wildcats and also pumas or in Argentina, obviously known as mountain lions in North America. So there's companies that do pumas there. So that's the second book. It's about the hunting companies. And it's also got almost like TripAdvisor style reviews by some of their customers saying,
Wow.
we had the greatest time, and they talk about their own adventures, and it says, how much some of these animals are being sold for, and also some of the packages because you can get multi-animal packages. So, for example, a deal to shoot 10 zebras at once, or a father and son bonding team, or a hunting family for for all the family, and that includes the children. They get to shoot as well. You get graduation packages. Anyway, so all the different types of
Wow.
holidays,
Yeah, I had
hunting
no
holidays,
idea that all of that existed.
you're going to find out when you read it.
Yeah.
So it's all there. So that's book three. And then book three is looking actually just at the British side of things. And I did that, A, because obviously this is where I'm
I mean,
based, but
is
also
British is that where we kind of think the trophy hunting began just because of the
exactly,
colonialism?
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly right. It's the origins of it. So I sort of tell, how it was something that emerged and evolved with the colonies in both Africa and in India. And the extraordinary killing rates of some of the early British hunters. For example, there's one guy, he's actually called John Alexander Hunter. He died in the 1960s. He was from Scotland, and he shot 1,500 rhinos, 1,400 elephants,
Three.
and 600 lions, and lots more animals. So he's just sort of one example. And of course, as I mentioned before, they literally wiped out certain animals, certain species from the face of the earth. So it sort of starts with that, and then it looks at the British industry today, partly because I kind of wanted to wake people up in Britain saying this wasn't just something that happened in the days of empire and it's now gone, and it's only those, nutty Americans that are doing it, right? No, this is something that still happens in Britain. So, for example, British trophy hunters have shot 100 lions since Cecil. British trophy hunters shot 200 endangered animals just last year. They're killing elephants and they're bringing the ears and feet of elephants home. And so I name the top British hunters, I name the top British companies, and in some cases, they're also the world's top hunters and top companies as well. Also, the top taxidermists, and also the companies that are involved in the shipping and processing, because you've got to get these things back into the
That's right.
country. So, who are the companies that are doing that? Where do they actually enter the country? How do they then get delivered to somebody's doorstep? So
Yeah.
it explains kind of everything, and we got. In fact, there's a documentary, a film that goes with that book. It's the kind of the film version of the book, if you like, and where we show a lot of the undercover film footage that we got. For example, inside the homes of top trophy hunters, where you can see. I mean, there's one guy, for example, he's got 500 trophies in his trophy room, including a polar bear skin on the floor. We visit other trophy rooms. We visit the workshops of top taxidermists, one of which was crowned world champion a couple of years ago for the work that he does, and he's a trophy hunter as well. One of there's a British lawyer, a woman, who was actually voted the best trophy hunter, the best female trophy hunter in the world by Safari Club International and the NRA, and she's a lawyer from London. There's a guy, he's actually just died, but a British guy, a British businessman, a property developer, who was arguably the number two trophy hunter in the world, and he'd shot hundreds of animals, including cheetahs and polar bears, and people didn't know that. People didn't know that there's still British hunters who are amongst the top hunters in the world, and British companies who are in the top 10 companies in the world today.
Well, and that's probably intentional on their part. They're not advertising it.
No, you're right. They are very, very careful about keeping their head low because obviously this is quite a, a strong political issue, and people get
Yeah.
very angry about it. And when stories like Cecil come along, there's a hell of a lot of news coverage, and politicians get involved, and Jimmy Kimmel cries about it on TV, and Mia Farrow says what she said, etc., etc. It becomes a big issue. But it's only when those things happen, and you will have noticed, if you might remember from all those years ago, the trophy hunting industry never comes to the camera. You never get
Yeah.
the president of Safari Club International on 60 Minutes or on NBC or on CNN talking about, look, this is why trophy hunting's great. We think it's great and it should be. They never appear. They work very hard to keep a low profile and to keep the story out of the news. And what they do is they get proxies to be their spokespeople.
Yeah.
proxies who have greater credibility, if you like, than they do. So, for example, in the UK, there are two people in particular the trophy hunting industry funds. And I say that because it's in the public record. There's no,
Sure.
and I put it in the print in the papers as well. It funds them, and they are the people who put forward as the spokespeople. So one of them is a scientist, a conservationist, but she's funded by Safari Club International. She's funded by Dallas Safari Club, and her research is funded by Dallas Safari Club as well.
Yeah.
And she goes out, and often I've been on a one head to head with her on the TV. And she says, no, it's good for conservation, and we should whatever. She says her piece. She brings out the party line, if you like.
Right.
And
Right.
then the other person, she's an African woman, and she runs a project in Namibia, which is supposedly a kind of a hunting conservation best practice model. So the idea is that, in theory, that the involvement of trophy hunting companies means that the habitats and the species are conserved for posterity. And that project receives money again from Safari Club International and all the rest of
Yeah.
it. The slight problem with that case study is that in the last decade, the wildlife populations there have fallen by 2/3. And this is their data. This isn't my data. This is
Right.
their data. So for a best practice role model case study, it's doing pretty badly.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the fact is, and this is one of the things I say, particularly when we talk about the conservation side of things. Look, wildlife faces so many threats today, and it's in real trouble. The World Wildlife Fund, who I used to work for, in fact, one of the things I was involved in was the production of this report, the Living Planet report. We
Yeah.
bring out every 2 years, and it gave a trend, if you like, of what's happening to the world's wildlife populations. And it says, the last report said that since 1970, wildlife populations as a whole have gone down by 70%. And what we're finding is that with some of the most popular animals for trophy hunters, the figures are even worse. So lion populations have fallen by at least 90%, if not more. Leopard populations seem to be going down at the same rate. And when these species already face so many threats, it's habitat degradation and loss, human encroachment, it's changing climates and diseases and droughts and their prey is dying, all of these things. And trophy hunting is one of the factors, but it's also making the whole situation worse. It's making what's already a bad situation even worse. And it's also because of the nature of trophy hunting. Because of course
Right.
these people are going after the biggest and the best. It's not just the numbers of animals; they're taking out the pride males. Well, if you take
Right.
out a pride male, you could be condemning 20 lions to death, because then when that animal is gone, firstly you're going to get other young males going to try and take over the pride. They're going to commit infanticide, so they will kill off the progeny of the previous pride male. They may kill off any other males in fights. The lionesses may try to escape. In fact, this happened with Cecil. So when Cecil was killed, two of the lionesses of that pride ran away to try to escape from these new marauding young males. And they actually went onto a farm and they were hungry. So they killed a donkey on that farm.
Yeah.
So then the wildlife control officers were called in because here was, two problem animals. They killed those two lionesses. And when they examined the bodies afterwards, they found that they were both lactating. In other words, there were two prides, litters of young lion cubs somewhere in the bush that will have died of starvation
That's
because
awful.
of all of that. And that's all the consequence of killing one lion. But the other thing is that because you're shooting the biggest and the strongest animals, you're affecting the whole gene pool. So scientists have found that the gene pool of the lion species has shrunk by 15% over the last century. So it's already lost 15% of its best genes. And the
Right.
scientists say that actually, the way things are now, it probably would only take the killing of 5% of the best remaining adult males for the lion species to be condemned to extinction. What a horrifying thought is that?
That's awful. Yeah, that's terrible. That's terrible. Have you if you're writing about all of this, you're bringing a lot of this kind of to light. Have you received any negative responses?
Well, only from trophy hunters.
Well, yeah, and that's kind of what I was thinking, is that I would think that these books would upset someone
It
that
did.
does that.
Yeah. Although it was quite interesting. After my first book, Trophy Hunters Exposed, there's one of these hunting magazines. It's called Accurate Reloading, and there was a trophy hunter who wrote in there about my first book, and he said, "We're done for. There's no way we're going to be able to rationalize what we do now that people now know the facts. We're finished." And so I've actually used that as a sort of endorsement, if you like, in my latest book. So I think it's sort of an interesting reflection. But of course, I mean, that's not the view of all of them. And because I've been trying to get this bill passed through the British Parliament to
Yeah,
ban imports of hunting trophies, and there's been a big campaign. But there's already, it was quite interesting. One of the things that I came across during my investigation was that quite a few British hunters and companies are looking at ways of how to get around the law. And that always happens. But they have already started thinking about quite sophisticated ways and some less sophisticated ways of doing it. So, either bringing it into one country that you can and then sort of driving it over, or, hiding it in your suitcase, or getting a fake invoice to show that it's a souvenir that you bought at the airport
right.
rather than a hunted. All of these things, even bringing it in on a trailer across the from France and so on. So, they are going to try. Some people can't um, can't get weaned off this habit.
Right.
But I tell you one, there is one bit of good news. Because I've looked at all the data for the last decade and more, there are fewer and fewer trophy hunters. So the average age of trophy hunters is going up because there's no young generation
That's
coming to
good.
fill the places. The number of companies and attendees at the Safari Club International Conventions is going down. And the total volume of trade in endangered species, it's actually fallen by about half in the last decade. So you
Seems
compare the
good.
figures. So this is good news. So it's kind of like society is waking up to the fact, and Cecil probably had something to do with this,
Sure.
that this is no longer an acceptable way to behave. This isn't an acceptable way to live with our fellow earthlings, if you like. This isn't an acceptable way to treat fellow travelers on this earth, particularly those that are in real risk of becoming extinct. People are recognizing this is something that actually does belong in a history book. It doesn't belong in the present, and certainly shouldn't be part of our future.
Well, Eduardo, thank you for taking a little bit of time to talk about it. It's such a broad subject. I hope you'll come back at some point because there's so much more we could go into.
Do you know, I've done a couple of other shows recently. They both said exactly the same things. Hey, can you come back and talk some more? I said to them, look, I will keep talking about this whilst this is still going on. I will only shut up when it's finished, when it's gone, when it's banned and abolished. So I would be more than happy to come and speak again, Michael.
Yeah, this is it's been very enlightening, a little upsetting, but thank you for going through all of it. Before we wrap up, kind of go through where we can find the books and when they're coming out.
So if you go onto Amazon, Amazon.com,
Yeah.
so the first two books are now up there and available for sale. So that's 20 Elephants in 75 Minutes and Shoot One Lion, Get One Free. Those are available on Amazon right now. And the book three, Mainlining on Heroin, that's going to be available in about 2 weeks' time. So we're nearly
Okay.
there. Certainly, by the time that this 10th anniversary of the killing of Cecil, which is the 1st of July, well, in fact, it's actually a 2 day anniversary, if you like, because of course he was shot once and then shot again. Anyway,
Right.
by the 1st of July, all three books will be out there on Amazon and anyone can pick it up. And we're also actually going to launch a new website, trophyhunters.org, where we're going to put as much information for free on the public domain so people can research it for themselves. And of course, what we want people to do is get in touch with your elected representative, right?
Yes.
tell them what you think and tell them that your vote depends on what they're going to do about it. Because at the end of the day, these people, they are our employees, right?
That's
We
right.
hire them and pay them to do a job for us because we're busy raising families,
That's
running
right.
businesses, whatever. We can do plumbing, but we can't do politics. So we pay these people to do this for us, like we get plumbers maybe to do it if we can't, if we don't know how to do plumbing. That's what they're there to do. They're there to work for us and represent us.
That's
So call them, visit them, write them. And it's always better if you're going to write to them, is do it on actual paper with a stamp on it, because then they see, oh, somebody's actually taken the trouble to,
to write
actually
something out.
write a
Yeah,
letter rather than it's just another email
that's
or
right.
another petition. No, get personal with them. Yeah, get up in front of them in a nice, I mean, in a pacific way. Do I'm not saying go and bully these people, but tell them, make it clear to them
That's right.
that this is where you stand, and you need them to go and do this for you. And then if they don't, they won't be getting your vote.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Are you on social media? Where can we find you at?
Yeah, we are on our website is bandtrophyhunting.org.
Yeah.
And we've got all our social media platforms you can connect to from there. So bandtrophyhunting.org.
Well, Eduardo, thank you so much, and best of luck. I mean, you're doing some good work out there. I hope that it continues to see positive results, because I think it's going to help all of us, even those of us that don't necessarily want the help.
Well, the first step to action is awareness, isn't it?
That's right.
And so, and I want people to know as much as information as they want to know, and that's partly why we're going to set up this website as well. And yeah, hopefully, it will inspire people to well get out there and tell our politicians what they need to do, and they need to do it now because a lot of our wildlife animals, they don't have that long left. The window is getting smaller and smaller. But, irrespective of that, it's just plain wrong. These animals, we shouldn't be killing them for fun. And we shouldn't be wounding them in the horrific ways that they're being wounded every single day. Remember this one thing: a trophy hunter shoots an animal every 3 minutes.
That's that's upsetting here, and that's that. Yeah, that's awful. Well, Eduardo, thank you so much, and we'll do this again at some point. I've had a terrific time. Yeah, thank you.
Well, it'll be my pleasure to join you again, Michael.
Yeah, yes, sir. Okay, hold on one second. Eduardo Goncalves. Hopefully, I got that somewhere close. Obviously, a very passionate guy, very intelligent guy that is putting his time to such a good cause. I've not that I'm an advocate or out there, probably doing what I should be doing to help, do my part in this struggle to save some of our wildlife. But I've never been comfortable with hunting myself. Don't have a real issue with it if it's needed for survival, but that's not usually the case. It's usually for sport, and I'm not a fan. Not a fan. We spend a lot of time dealing with the gun crisis, especially here in the United States, and that's a real issue that should not be that hard to solve. It's a terrible thing that we have done to ourselves, and that's why we keep having all of these horrible shootings. But this wildlife issue is just as dangerous to all of us. If we start losing these species or continue to lose these species, it affects the entire chain of everything. That circle of life can't happen if you're missing parts of the circle. And we're doing that to ourselves, just like we've been doing with the environment. Most of the issues we have on this planet are self-made. And unfortunately, there's a large part of our population across the world, but, I'm feeling it here in the States, that just aren't interested in taking care of anything. It's look out for yourself, and we're not looking out for the planet the animals that we share it with. We're not looking out for their welfare at all. So just terrible. So hopefully you enjoyed that. You got something out of it. I encourage you to pick up the book. So it's 20 Elephants in 75 Minutes, Shoot One Lion, Get One Free, and Mainlining on Heroin. I don't think I've ever had an author putting out 3 books at one time before. That's unusual, but obviously needed. Yeah, there's a lot that we didn't get to talk about. I meant to ask him about, there's ranches here in the United States where you can go and you can shoot zebras and kangaroos. Why you would need to shoot those, I do not know, but those exist, which is pretty upsetting. And then there's just so much more that we could go into as far as the history behind trophy hunting and the industry that is currently going on with and around trophy hunting. Difficult subjects. I appreciate you guys joining us. It's a little different from what we normally do, but I love shedding light on important projects, and this one from Eduardo, obviously top of the list. Absolutely loved having him on. If you're new to us, I've got good news for you. We're going to hit our 1000th episode probably within the next few weeks. We've been doing this for about 6.5 years. That's a big number. We've been very blessed to have just the best list of guests. I encourage you to check that out. I guarantee you'll find subjects that you're interested in, subjects that will interest you, and people that you're fans of, or that they'll introduce themselves to you and you'll become fans of. So our YouTube channel is MeisterCon Pod. Please subscribe. Doesn't cost you anything. Really helps us out. MeisterCon Pod on YouTube. Our website's meistercon.com. You can find all of those episodes, audio and video versions. So please check us out there, meistercon.com. Thank you guys so much. Till next time. Bye, everybody.